Right now, Jo Coburn and Politics Live.
It's Wednesday, it's 11:15 and we're live in Westminster. Joining me today, the Conservative peer and Times columnist Daniel Finkelstein, the Labour MP Luke Pollard, Evening Standard columnist and ex-Labour advisor Ayesha Hazarika, and the chair of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona. Albie, where are you on this? Are you with Danny Finkelstein or are you with the Mail?
I think broadly I agree with what Danny has just said. The only place where I would disagree is where he said on the doorstep. So I'm in touch with a lot of Tory activists across the country, and what I'm hearing is that down in London and the South East, people are very disappointed and share Danny's opinions, and in other parts of the country, in the Midlands and in the north of the country, they just want the Prime Minister to get on with the manifesto commitments that he committed in the 2019 general election. Yes, of course, people are going to be angry about what's happened. This sense of hypocrisy and one rule for the government and one rule for the country is making people angry. But there is a programme of government that we need to get on with in this country, and I'm worried that this debacle is stifling that.
I'd like to be ambushed by cake occasionally. Albie, what about your view about on the big issues? Cabinet ministers have said he got it right. Does that mitigate in any way what has gone on?
I don't know that it mitigates it in any meaningful way, but I think it is. I think there is a point in saying that there are decisions that Boris Johnson has made since his premiership began, which I don't know that any other Conservative Prime Minister would have made. Whether or not that was with breaking the Brexit deadlock, whether or not that was with the vaccine rollout and many other things. I'm not sure there are other people in the Conservative Party that I would look to and think, yes, I think they would have made the same decision as Boris Johnson. So I think that's what they're trying to get at when they make that point.
All right, Albie?
I probably would not have used the same words that Crispin had used himself personally. It's not really like a speeding ticket. There is a real sense that many people in the country, most people in the country, followed the rules to the T, and those who made the rules were not following those same rules that they imposed on other people, and that's where there is a real sense of injustice. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for ordinary people to be angry at that. So, I don't think Crispin should have used those words personally.
Albie?
I think the arguments being put out by, Conservative MPs in Number 10 in defence of what's gone on are poor. But I think the idea that the biggest issue facing this country is the Prime Minister going to some parties is not true. I'm angry about what's happened at Number 10, but I think there is some truth in the proportion argument. In normal times, this would not be headline news. So I do think we do need to really be thinking about the other issues which are going on in the world, and thinking about whether or not we want the government to be focusing on this or focusing on those issues, whether or not that's a cost of living crisis, whether or not that's Ukraine, whether or not that's Chinese aggression towards Taiwan. There are real issues going on as well.
Luke?
And then cricket becomes secondary. And part of that is because it's a rather more time-consuming sport than some others.
Now, those comments sparked a backlash. Mike O'Farrell has since apologised. What was your reaction when you heard that?
I think when we're talking about these issues, we always have to be really careful with the tone that we strike, and it has to be the right tone. And I don't think it's necessarily helped that it's an old white bloke who has made these claims. But I also think it's really important in British race relations that we start speaking about things in a more constructive way. And we also understand the phenomenon that racial disparity doesn't always equal racism, and I think that's what he was trying to get at. And there was a cricket player, Samit Patel, who actually said something very similar to what this gentleman has said. And I think Samit Patel essentially said something along the lines of, British South Asian parents at some point prefer their children to pursue more academic routes because they prefer economic security. And that's a phenomenon that we do see. So I think we just have to take care when we're talking about these issues, and not necessarily jump down people's throats when they say the wrong thing.
Albie, were you disappointed that Nusrat Ghani was urged to use the Conservative Party process rather than the government just gripping it at the time?
I definitely would have liked to have seen the government get a grip of this before 2 years after the event happened. I wish that we'd have come to this conclusion quicker, because having the Prime Minister order the inquiry on Monday within 24 hours of the story breaking shows that it was actually possible to do this Cabinet Office inquiry that she wanted initially. And actually, the Conservative Party complaints process at the moment is, of course, under review until the Singh investigation recommendations are implemented later on this year. So we've already agreed that the complaint system isn't fit for purpose. So referring someone to that complaint system to make a complaint about Islamophobia probably wasn't the right call.
Danny? Albie?
I think that it's very possible that after the Sue Gray report is published that 54 letters will go in. What I'm not sure about is whether or not he would lose a vote of no confidence. And I think what we could end up in the position where he wins a vote of no confidence and resets his government and then continues to lead in that kind of direction. I think that is a possible outcome.
So you do see a way back for Boris Johnson in the event of that happening?
I don't think you can ever count Boris Johnson out. I don't know why that is, but he's just got this unbelievable bounce-backable ability.
Right, and in terms of damage to the party brand in that instance, I mean, there are warnings from cabinet ministers that those Tory MPs who would like a leadership contest should be careful what they wish for. Is this the right time for a leadership contest?
I think for the reasons that I mentioned before about all of the other things going on in the world, you know, it's probably not the right time for a leadership election. But whenever is the right time for a leadership election would be the opposite argument. So I can really see both sides of the equation.
I mean, does it... Right, is it credible if that is what unfolds? Because Boris Johnson could decide, if Sue Gray says that Boris Johnson was unwittingly at some of these gatherings and they were actually an extension of work events, and the people who lose their jobs, as Danny says, are the Chief of Staff, the Principal Private Secretary, who seemingly wrote that email inviting people to bring their own booze to a party. Will that be enough for you?
A top-to-bottom reform of the operation at Number 10 is something that myself and many Conservative commentators have been calling for since the Owen Paterson scandal, because it's been very clear to me that the Prime Minister's been getting some really bad advice. But that was before Christmas. And I think what my thoughts were towards the end of last year is that on the other side of Christmas, we really started to need to see some changes in how Number 10 responded to events. And I'm not sure that change has happened. So I think the time for just reorganising Number 10 is either coming to its end or it's over. And we really need to start seeing some of those changes that many of us have been hoping for now.
Well,
he should go.
You don't know necessarily when people talk about the nation in the way Luke has, or perhaps the Mail did on the front page. How do you see the mood, Albie?
I think one of the things about Keir Starmer and Prime Minister's questions is I think last week we were really expecting Keir to go quite hard on Boris. And I actually don't think he went as hard on Boris as he could have done. And I actually don't know that he landed the jokes in the way that I think he thought they were going to land. So I'm not really sure what direction Keir's going to take this week. I imagine the Prime Minister will be trying to steer people onto the important global issues and the cost of living crisis, more so than speaking about the Sue Gray report. I think he will refer people back to the fact that's yet to be reported on.
Right, and Ayesha